We're live.
We're live. Hey, y'all.
Hi.
Well, welcome to Faith Deep, your weekly deep dive, the quarantine edition. It's me, the KJ Special. KJ.
Yes. Hi, KJ. And you got the here. Okay. I'm here. And I can't say to the left of me or the right of me, so
I know, right?
In that corner.
It's like the Brady Bunch, that little box. Right. But
my name's Afeni Grace, Miss Grace, if you what?
And we
and we have a guest. I know she was like, is this where I go? This week we have a guest. Yes, Erin.
I was like, can I introduce myself? I don't know.
Yeah, you can introduce yourself. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Erin Steele, and I am a therapist based here in Charlotte. I specialize in working with trauma. People have experienced all levels of trauma, but I work with all kinds of cases. Bilingual therapist here in Charlotte.
Hey,
bilingual.
Okay. So this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we definitely wanted to bring on a professional for our inaugural, quarantine edition with the Zoom call. And so with everything that's going on right now, we just thought it would be helpful and it would be informative to have someone who deals with this on a regular basis, mental health, and who can help us and help people who listen to us. So again, like I said, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Black Americans are 20% more likely to suffer from mental health issues than their white counterparts. This results in difficulty finding work and homelessness and lack of other vital needs because it definitely spills into other areas of your life. Culturally incompetent practitioners where Black Americans experience racism and microaggressions from therapists, such as dismissing their complaints of racial insensitivity in the workplace. Black Americans, we heavily rely in general on prayers to cope with stress and mental illness. And 63% of African Americans believe that depression is a sign of weakness. And so Afeni listed here a syndrome, a condition called post-traumatic slave syndrome, where it's a theory of multi-generational PTSD of Black Americans based on slavery and systematic racism, which, basically it speaks for itself. Exactly that. So we can get into kind of some of the questions that we had, or did you want to expand on?
Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate that Afeni brought that up because there is studies around the epigenetics of trauma, which is basically when trauma is written on your DNA. And so when you have a baby, that traumatic encoding is passed on to them. And so it is very conceivable that we experience trauma that our ancestors experienced centuries ago just because they experienced it and it was written on their genetic code and passed on to us. And so we operate sometimes in survival mode and don't even recognize it.
Right. Don't even realize that we're there.
Yeah. I'll wait for your questions.
It's a conversation, but that's heavy though.
Yeah.
That's heavy. You're born with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not Maybelline.
Not Maybelline. Stress. Trauma.
It's just trauma.
Lord. So I guess our first question, I'll just kick it off. Everybody jump in, whenever you see fit. The stigma of mental health in the Black community. What is the stigma in your profession, in your experience?
We don't talk about our business. What happens at the house stays at the house. We're strong, independent Black men or women. A lot of these thought processes kind of put us in a position to not be human. And so we deny our own humanity for these reasons and end up suffering, sometimes in silence. And then, sometimes it comes out in other ways. So we have drug addiction, we have aggression, we have scenarios where we just don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to interact with other people because we have all of these things bound up in us that we feel like we can't get out, because if we talk about it, then we're breaking whatever code for the family, or we're just not being strong anymore. So it kind of, it puts us in a corner where we're not allowed to be human. But the other side of that is, having come from such a traumatic past, not talking about what's real for you could save your life. So, during times of slavery, you don't complain about it being too hot. You don't complain about being hungry. You don't complain about certain things. So you learn to just be quiet and do what you're told, and then you live. And so it puts you in a really weird space, especially when we think about the epigenetics of trauma and how things are passed down. To really not know what to do and not know what's a maladaptive behavior that we're expressing, when we could figure out something that is actually beneficial to us. But we don't question it, we don't challenge it, because it's how things go. It's what our mama and grandmama did, and so we don't know to do anything different.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Like, another stigma surrounds like meditation and mindfulness. Like, Black people have this idea that that's like not of God. Like, I've heard of people who are religious talk about how you're like opening, by being mindful, by meditating, you're opening yourself up for like negative, evil spirits to come and inhabit your body. And it's like these ideas like hinder people from seeking treatment, from seeking like healing in a way that feels most comfortable for them. Like, they just write those things off,
Right.
Unfortunately.
I just saw like a whole thread of this girl going off about that, specifically about how like meditation wasn't of Christ if you're not meditating on his word specifically. And I'm not like a Bible. I don't know the word like that. You know what I'm saying? But I was just like, meditation has been one of the things that have like helped me.
Yeah, me too. For sure.
Honestly, like, get some peace of mind. Like, that's one thing that has helped me. So it just made it sound real evil. Like,
right. And if anything, it strengthens your relationship with God. Like, that's literally what it does. And I think people just have like this idea, and that's surrounding that stigma with Black people. They have this idea around things that just isn't accurate,
When a lot of times we are afraid of what we don't know, and when we're afraid of it, we don't get past that fear to be curious. And so we stop with, oh, I don't do that, I don't know nothing about that, and then we never get curious about it to see how it could be beneficial for us. When it comes to religion, obviously as a therapist, I don't like push any type of religion onto anybody, but what I do tell people is that whatever you believe, because you believe it, it will work. And that's how I feel like the universe works, how prayer works. Because you believe in it, you're putting that energy out there. So if you believe that meditation is something that opens a portal to whatever bad things, well, okay, maybe that's what it is. But if someone else believes that it's something that helps them kind of recenter and focus and be able to be productive and be able to be calm and rational in their thinking, then that's what it does for them. And we have to give people space to have agency around that.
I think also, I know we were talking about before that, just therapy period. I think this another stigma is people thinking that you go to therapy and mental illness is you being crazy. Like, people don't take it seriously. Like, anxiety and depression are like a real thing. And people just think, oh, you're crazy. Like, we don't need therapy. We're a therapist for it. Just like we talked about earlier, pray to God. Say what you need to say to God. Everything, have faith, work it out. But God didn't just create us and make therapists be put on this earth for no reason. They have a job. That's their job. Their job is to diagnose. So I just don't understand why people feel that way. But again, that's back to what Erin said about generational curse. I mean, I was always taught, like, if I tell my mom now, she would be like, why are you doing therapy? Why? She wouldn't understand. I just feel like that's that's just something that has been implemented in the Black community for a long time. Like, we don't believe in that. We believe in God, and that's just what we should do, pray.
Like, think about it. I feel like we all have a family member. It'd be like, oh, he not all the way right. Or,
right.
Or my nerves bad.
Right.
I feel like, all of those like little things where people say, oh, like, we don't want to admit it. Like, we know it's something. We know it's something.
Not have the language to describe what it is.
Right. The language to describe what it is, or like, I don't know. I feel like people are like, even in the thing that I read before, like, we're just too prideful to admit that maybe something isn't right, or maybe something, maybe this is something that we can actually help or get help for. Like,
we're also supposed to be the strong race because of everything that we've gone through and been through. We're supposed to be the strong one. So I feel like that also plays a lot too. You don't want to tell people what's going on with you because you feel like you wouldn't have that support. You're supposed to kind of like hide that and go about your business. You're supposed to go about your business. That's how we've always dealt with it as a community. We don't know anything else.
Have y'all seen? Go ahead, Erin. I'm sorry.
No, just the other side of saying like, oh, strong Black, whatever. The other thing that's not being said is like, well, you just have to endure. And it's and so like, I mean, as a therapist, we're always listening to what's being said, but also what's not being said, And so having those concepts like always kind of passed around, and not just in your family and in your conversations with your friends, but also like in movies, in all of our entertainment and our music, everything is telling us be strong, be strong. Even what we think is like the uplifting kind of music is like, you hear people rapping or singing about like strong Black woman, I'm a strong Black man, whatever. And it says like, you just have to deal. And it does not make you strong to be or weak to be human.
Right.
That you're just human, and there's things that go right and things that go wrong, and everybody has different ways of dealing with it. And sometimes the ways that our parents dealt with it is not what works for us. And so if all we have is that example of our parents or whoever else was influential in our lives, and their methods don't work for us, sometimes it's helpful to have somebody guide you through finding out a new way to deal with your stressors.
Right. I was gonna ask y'all, have y'all seen that show, Black AF?
Yes.
So there was people either love or hate that show, but there was an episode where one of the daughters was like dancing, and then they went into on Instagram Live or something like that, and they went into what they called adultification of Black women. And that's just kind of like what that reminded me of, how we're just automatically, other races just, we're looked at as older or more mature, and that just kind of reminded me of like, we're just expected to just endure these things. They'll treat a 18-year-old, for example, like white man as a kid, but if it's an 18-year-old Black man, he's old enough. He's a man. Huh?
I was saying, known better to do
it. He should have known better. Like, we're just expected to be able, that's just what it is. We're expected to be able to handle more. Like, yeah. And I don't know how to get out of that, because it is so ingrained into us. Like, it's,
I think a good way to get out of that is to give people space to not be strong. Like, if you see someone, if you have a friend who is sad, to let them be sad and know that not to get biblical on you, but weeping may endure for a night, but they won't be sad for forever. Right. I remember when I was in graduate school and I was doing my internship, I was running a women's group, and they were all women who had lost their children for whatever reason. And I had one client, she said to me, she was like, sometimes I feel like if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. And I knew what she was saying, but I didn't know how to respond to her. Like, I know she didn't literally mean that. I knew that she meant that she just had overwhelming sadness, but I didn't know how to respond. And so at that time, we still get supervision. So we go to our professors and we talk about our cases. And so I was telling my professor about this, and he said, no one's ever cried themselves to death, but people drown in their emotions every day. And I was just like, that's exactly what I should have said to her in the moment. But it's a very real thing that we all have, like, for 5,000 things that we say, there's 10,000 things that we keep to ourselves. Everybody's got this internal dialogue going about who they are, who they think they are in relationship to their significant other, their friends, the rest of the world. And we have all these thoughts that we keep to ourselves because naturally we do. But some people have figured out that, okay, well, some of these thoughts, maybe I can't let out to certain people in my world, but if I have a therapist, a place where I can be just a mess and not get judgment, but just someone who's going to help me sort it all out, then I feel like maybe you can like resonate in the world a little better. And you don't feel such an overwhelming sadness. But yeah, the first way we start is to just let people feel their feelings without judgment and be able to be there with them in that. But it takes, it takes someone who is okay with their feelings as well.
Right.
Some people are uncomfortable when people show strong emotion.
Yeah. Somebody around you start crying, like, I don't know what to do.
But I think sitting in that and not knowing what to do and just being like, well, I'm gonna just let you cry, and then ask them like, okay, well, do you need a hug? Do you need me to pat you on your back? Do you need to sit here? Like, be confused about it and then be curious, like, how can I help? What do you need from me? I feel like that's a really great place to start because you don't have to have all the answers. You can actually ask and get them.
That's really good advice. Let people just feel whatever they're feeling already.
Yeah.
Hate it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just to kind of bring it back a little bit, as far as being a underrepresented minority in the workplace, how does that exacerbate, I guess, like your experience in the field?
As a therapist?
As a therapist.
Oh boy.
Or does it? Because I'm asking like I'm just
no,
assuming.
it absolutely does. And it's been a struggle for me ever since I was in graduate school. So I went to graduate school at a school called Appalachian in Boone. And it's a very, 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 very Caucasian town. Now, let me tell you, my classes were so rich. Like, I feel like I grew so much as a human being, but I constantly felt like I had to teach these white people about Black people because they just didn't know. And even that professor that I was just talking about a minute ago, he and I had a conversation like a few years after I graduated at a conference. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know that you, like, as awesome as I think you are, I don't know that you could really be a good therapist for a Black person because there's just certain things you're not going to understand. And him and all of his white madness is like, yeah, I can do anything. I can be a therapist for anybody. And I was like, that right there is the problem, because that's not realistic. And I think it's good for all therapists to know where the lines are drawn, where we can't necessarily go. But as a therapist, as a Black therapist, I'll be honest, I've had scenarios where like I've been called a nigger by my clients' parents. I have worked with a lot of children, so I've been called a nigger by my clients' parents. I've had my clients tell me that their parents call me that outside of session. But I've had a lot of racial issues with the Hispanic population, which was really surprising. I've had one mother tell me that she didn't want me to come back to her house because she thought that Black women were lazy, which was really hard for me personally because offending your face.
As I'm here to help you and your family.
Yeah.
In a language that's not my own, right? Like, I've learned your language. Nobody else in my family speaks Spanish, not fluently anyway. So like, I did this work to be able to help you, but you're calling me lazy. And so my mental health gets a little rattled and a little shaken because I'm like, I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to be a support for people, but it is hard to be supportive when you've got people kind of spitting on you and being nasty to you. And so one thing that I've had a problem with, and we've not really found a solution because I've talked with my supervisors about it, is like, well, what do I do? Like, how do I, manage myself in those moments? I'm always going to be professional, right? But then it's like after that, I have to switch it off and go work with somebody else, or I have to go do something else productive. But then there's like this thing, and then I have to go back to that person's house. And act like it never happened.
Right.
Sometimes I'll address it depending on who they are, but it puts you in a crazy space sometimes where I'm constantly having to do my own self work to.
Yeah, like who helps the therapist?
Right.
I mean, I do have a therapist, but even in talking with my therapist friends, like no one really has like a good answer on what to do with that. Recently at our marriage and family therapy conference this year, we did it long social distancing, so it was a Zoom call like this, but on the side there was like a chat that was like crazy because I started it telling them about some of these experiences that I've had, and they decided to ask the presenter my question about what do you do when you're a therapist of color and your clients are kind of based upon like your skills, right? So for the agency that I work at, they will give the trauma clients to me, they'll give the Spanish speaking clients to me because of these skills that I have. Mm-hmm. It's not a private practice where I can be like, don't want to see that client, don't want to see that client. And the presenter even said, just don't work with them then, but that's not an option.
Right.
Right.
Even though it's probably best for everybody's mental health, if they have those kind of feelings, and that might be a barrier for them. Right. But that's just not always an option. And so for me, it's about me doing a lot of self-care, spending time with friends like me and Afeni going to the park on Fridays, or, the arts and crafts that I do all the time are just kind of my ways to kind of like calm my mind and do something different and remember something good in the world.
Right.
But yeah, no, it absolutely exacerbates the experience when I'm in those situations. But then also working with Black people who are like, I know I need therapy, but they're not really ready. They're not ready to be open. That's also hard because I don't want to be in the position of just like convincing someone to be in therapy. I'm like, you got to be ready for this. But it's almost like I want to, because I'm so happy and excited that our people are coming. I know that there's still a stigma, but I do feel like there's been a shift. Mental health is something we're talking about all the time. And I do recognize that like more and more I'm having clients of color come in at the private practice where I work. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience that there's a concept called self of the therapist. It's like how you use who you are in the therapy session, where I'm constantly having to gauge and manage that depending on who I'm working with.
Right. So go ahead.
Go ahead, Keith.
So I was just gonna ask, do you run into that a lot? Like, do you have a lot of people who are like, I want help, but I'm just not really comfortable with giving it all to you? Like, I'm not really comfortable with that yet.
Yeah. And what I do is I talk to them about how I do therapy, because I think you have this idea that you go in and you lay on a couch and somebody's sitting there with a pen and notebook and they're just like kind of dry and talking to you. But I had one client where I actually still have my glue gun. We were sitting here doing arts and crafts. Like, I do all kinds of things with my clients so that they feel like we're relating and we're connecting in a way that's helpful. I have one client, she loves to do arts and crafts. They needed an art therapist. Now I don't have that certification, but I'm crafty. So she wanted to do a collage. So you know what we did? We did a collage. I try to connect with people on things that mean something to them. And then from there, once we built that rapport, they start to open up. And if it doesn't happen, then I'll say, hey, we've been working for a couple weeks and I feel like you really want to make some progress, but I don't know if I'm the person who's going to be on this journey with you. And so would you like for me to, make some recommendations or look, to see if I can help you find someone that's going to be a better fit.
Right. But you're not going to pretend like.
No, I don't. And I don't pretend and I don't take it personal.
Because you really want to help them.
Right.
Yeah, it's a gift when I have that connection. But if I don't fake it.
I want to go back to what you said about like the shift. Do you think you're seeing a shift in actually seeing Black people come in and do therapy because of the resources that are available now? Maybe them not knowing that there are Black therapists out there, or how to connect with Black therapists, or knowing people that actually went to therapy and that's why they're trying to connect with somebody that is a therapist, or what do you think about that? Or social media, or?
I think it's a combination of all of that. I think it's hearing about someone who was brave enough to try it and their experience. That is good, and it also worries me because some people don't realize the work that, because I am just a guide. You know, my professor used to call it hospice for the living. Like, we just transition you from one experience to another. And so I don't really do a lot, and I don't take a lot of credit. I'm just like, you did all the work. I just put it out there, like, maybe you should try this. Maybe this might be helpful. Maybe this is something that would help you to get closer to this goal that you're telling me about. Maybe this is not helping you get close to that goal, so we should do something different. And then people take the suggestions and do what they do with it. But I think that social media, I think having people who have some fame talking about mental health and talking about going to therapy, I think it's something that we see in a lot of our entertainment, especially TV and movies. Like, there's some kind of representation pretty frequently. I think seeing all of that kind of normalizes it. And so even though you may have these ideas from your family and from your past, like, we don't do that, there may be some curiosity that springs up for people, and they run with it. But don't get me wrong, there's still a stigma. There are definitely those people who are
Oh yeah, I feel like there's more
church, give it to the Lord, it'll be fine.
Ooh, right. Just pray it away. Pray it away. and it's not that there's even anything wrong with prayer and religion if you feel like, you know, that helps you, but sometimes you need a little more. You need a little more than that.
We have to not look at things as either or, that it's a both and situation. Right. And to look for the both and in things, right? Like, I can pray, I can go to church, and I can go to therapy.
Right.
Exactly. It's never one or the other.
So amongst all of this pandemic, the pandemic, COVID-19, all of that, have you noticed like a spike in people seeking mental health treatment, or have you noticed just a difference in general?
So yeah, right before all this happened at the agency where I work, to be honest with you, we were like, okay, how are we going to get more clients, right? Like, they were like, just hold on, see if you can, hold on to your clients for a little while longer. And then it became, okay, are you closing this person? Because we got like so many people waiting to be seen. So I don't know if it's specifically because of quarantine, but I do know that we are backed up. And I have had more people reaching out at the private practice where I work for couples therapy. Let me think. And then like clients that I had before that I've already closed out, being like, can we come back?
Good for you.
Right.
Or in person. Are you doing virtual or in-person therapy?
Virtual. I'm not going to see anybody. Yeah.
Well, that's convenient. That's helpful. I mean, that's like
I can't foresee having to be in the space with my clients anymore. I will say that as someone who's an empath, it does kind of change things a little bit when I'm in session. And it's also harder with children. Kids do not like to sit in front of a TV, in front of a computer screen. They don't like to sit and hold a phone. They don't. So that's where it gets a little like, okay. But yeah, everything is socially distanced. I actually had a client whose parent contracted coronavirus. And I think because of that, like, the length of time that they were thinking for when we would eventually go back is going to be extended.
I've noticed, even just personally with my own experience, I've noticed me kind of feeling more anxious. Like, when I go outside, like at some point I had to tell myself, like, you are going to be okay. Like, just do what you're supposed to do. You're going to be okay. But like, even certain like just feelings around death right now and how we have to be apart from our family, or like I went to a funeral I had to go to a funeral of a family member, and like the face that, like, just me even just standing there and looking at what the current situation of today was, I felt like it impacted me mentally and emotionally, because I was just like, is this really life right now? And then going through the shift of, okay, this is temporary. This is for a couple of, weeks. We'll see how it ends, After that, after these initial couple of weeks, things will be fine. And then realizing, oh no, like, it might not ever go back. Right. Like that was kind of my own mental processes, like trying to figure it out. Like,
and I feel like the mental health like aspect of this pandemic is unspoken. I feel like we're not really talking about it, especially Black people, especially young Black people. Like, I feel like we're not like talking about this, how this is going to impact us now and then also in the long term,
Well, one way that I know that Black people cope is through humor. And so it's been a lot of jokes. Wow. Because it went from being coronavirus, COVID-19 to Rona, the Rona. We definitely cope through laughing about things, which I feel like in some ways is okay, as long as we actually get to like, okay, this has really like changed how we interact with people. This has really changed like how comfortable we feel with like reaching out and hugging people and our proximity to people. Because even after this, like, it's just going to be different.
Right.
Yeah. And so, like I said, like right before we started recording, like as a therapist, I am very concerned about what it's going to be like the spike. There's a word for it, and I've been trying to recall, but it happened after 9/11, where because like this traumatic thing happened to our country that we've never really experienced on this side of the globe before. And then all of a sudden there was like a spike in depression and anxiety cases in the country. Right. But it was like the government didn't really know what they were doing. And they weren't giving really clear answers about what happened and why it happened. And so everybody's feeling this depression and anxiety and not really knowing why. When I think of the word, I'm going to tell you what I can think right now. But yeah, like I feel like there's going to be something like that happens just because of how poorly this has been handled by our government, and like all the misinformation that was given. There's just going to be a complete shift. And I think there's going to be some things that shift for the better, but then there's going to be some things that just leave us continuing to be socially distant when we don't necessarily have to be.
Oh yeah. That's trauma for you.
That's trauma. Yeah. Because I definitely, even with them like planning on opening the state up soon, I'm like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not going.
I'm not going anywhere.
Here yesterday, my job had a press conference yesterday. Like, it was a full-on press conference about how they were going to handle this and how they were going to transition everybody to go back to work in this upcoming week. And everybody's like, no, we're not going. We'll see you in a couple months.
Should have never let me start working from home. I love it. I love it so much. I don't want to go back.
It's like, see, where you messed up was.
Right, where you messed up was exposing me to the experience, because I love it.
I really do feel though working from home is going to be a new normal though. Like,
right. It's going to revolutionize.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be, I feel like before this happened, it wasn't something that people, unless your job was catered to that, it wasn't something that people actually cared for.
Didn't even consider it. Yeah.
Well, I'll just tell you, I knew that there were jobs that were specifically work from home if you have anxiety.
Wow.
There were jobs that I don't know where you could find them, but it was like jobs that were specific for people who had anxiety, social anxiety, where you could just work from home and you can make like a decent living working from home. I did know about that. Yeah.
And I know now there's industries where they would have never worked from home before, and now they've been opened up and exposed to working from home. And like, okay, so, and now I'm also like kind of just some cultural things are kind of shifting too, like things that people are being shamed for, right? So like, somebody wrote an article about my job and them still having employees come in. Yes. So now they're like publicly shamed for having employees come into the workplace, or this was it, or even just walking around and me seeing a kid without a mask on, or I'm seeing a person without a mask on. Like there's a little part of me that's like,
right. When I run to the store and I don't put my mask on because I'm like, I'm just getting some real quick. I'm like, oh God, these people are looking at me like
I'm holding my breath like
literally.
That's literally outside. Like the first week or two this happened, I walked outside and I was like, okay, we're going to the car. We don't have a mask yet. Just breathe as little. That's how it was. Like, try to conserve that apartment air until you get into the car. But it's these things that we're left to work out for ourselves. You know, the news is conflicting. It's airborne. It's not airborne. Wash your hands.
Don't wash your
hands.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Don't wear a mask. Like you don't. We're left to figure it out for ourselves, and it's hard because we don't know.
Right?
If the president don't know, how are we supposed to know?
He is hell's not gonna know anything. With that being said, deaths are rising, and now we're opening things up. It doesn't make much sense to me.
We're opening things up, and nothing's going down. Nothing. The numbers aren't lightening up any. So I'm confused.
I'm not confused. They're opening things up that are very specific to a certain demographic. And so that's why I'm just like, I'm not playing this game with the country. I'm staying home and I'm good. I'm good. I do my little grocery shopping and leave it at that. But
what did they say? I saw the meme. It was like, I'm gonna let y'all go outside. I'm gonna let y'all try the first batch and then I'm gonna come after and see how that goes. But again, that's scary because we're all just left to our own devices as far as like figuring out how to cope, what to believe, how to move forward. I don't know.
I think even to your point about the cultural shift, I think it's important for us to just grant people some grace because nobody really knows what to do and nobody really knows how to handle any of this. We're all figuring it out. And so if you see somebody and, you know, they don't have because I've seen a lot of jokes like you have your mask around your face, but not around your nose. And I'm like, I get it. It's very, very wrong. Like we breathe through both apparatuses, both parts, right? Like, but let's just bring it on down. No, we're not all doctors, and some people are not as intellectually inclined as others, and so we just have to grant some grace to people. And hopefully someone can kindly show them how to do, you know, but I see the little jokes about people wearing their masks in the car when they're by themselves. And I'm like, you don't know if like they're about to pick someone up who's immunocompromised. And so they're just pulling it. Like there's so many things that we don't know that we just need to chill and let people.
Right. Let them figure it out.
Gracious. Yeah.
Have any of y'all found like a good quarantine like routine for your day, for your life? Like have y'all been able to like kind of switch that up and figure out something that works well for y'all? Because I haven't.
I just started exercising again. I wasn't doing much of that when I was in the office because I felt like we've been so busy that my hours are not consistent and I can't get on a routine.
Right.
All I have time to do is sleep and work. And sleep and work. And sometimes I'm working so much I forget to eat.
Right.
I love it. Yeah, seriously. And I love to eat. Like I'll eat all day, but I'll go 8 hours and not eat because I'm working so much. That's just how it's been. So like I'm trying to exercise now. I'm trying to get up, do virtual exercising. They have trainers online. Everybody's at home, nobody's doing anything. So I think that's been helping a lot. We've also plug over here, Feeny. She's been doing mindful meditation classes with my organization. So that has helped a lot. We're doing another one at the end of this month for her. And that's been helping a lot. I don't know. I think I'm still trying to figure out too. Like, I'm just trying to find anything that
to
would
your
help.
point though, Tish, it has been hard to get a routine working from home because, like, no shade to where I work, but it's like now it feels like you work 24 hours a day, like in terms of the access that they feel, that you work with, the people you work with feel like they have to you.
Right.
Like the boundaries are different. And so you can't establish routines, like you would want to, which is actually really helpful for your mental health.
Right.
But
I find, like, literally, well, just to give y'all an example, I go to work at 7:00 in the morning and leave at 4. Like, nobody can say nothing to me walking out the door. Now they want to schedule meetings at 5:30. Why?
Right.
Why are we doing that? What are we doing? I don't know. I'm off. Why are we doing this? But then you feel obligated because it's like, you're home. What are you doing? You know what I mean?
Right.
The burnout is real.
Yeah, it is really real.
But I think what you do is you set a boundary. And I mean, I don't know where you work and I don't know like your status or whatever, but you have to set a boundary for your mental health because you are an employee there and they need you to be healthy so that you can do your work. And you need to be healthy too, because the thing is that if something happens to you, like if you have a mental break and you have to go into the hospital or something, they'll find someone else to do your job. Exactly. You have to prioritize yourself in ways that they may not, because they are going to try to access you if they can.
It will work.
And I think also just, a word, like schedule some time to eat, like put in your phone, set an alarm. I get it. But you have to prioritize those kinds of things because it can run rampant and sneak up on you. And then you're just kind of like, I don't know what happened, but you never set a boundary.
Yeah. Right. I feel like it was way easier to set boundaries in person versus virtually.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is. Absolutely. Because there's a physical thing where they can see you and then they can't. So they can't talk to you anymore if you're not there. But I think because this is a new experience that we're having to figure out, like you have to find the ways to set a boundary. And so maybe talking to, if there's anybody above you just or below you, just saying like, hey, these are the hours that I'm working. And if there's a meeting after that and I can schedule it in, then I'll be there. But if I can't, I'll need to be caught up at a later date. Like, you have to set, because it's pertinent to your mental health. It is pertinent to you being able to come back the next day and do what you need to do.
Exactly. I agree.
So you have to prioritize it. I did an interview 2 weeks ago talking about people in the medical profession, because we had the doctor in New York who died by suicide because she had contracted coronavirus, got well, and then she went back to work, and she, I guess, was overwhelmed by all of the deaths and decided, to die by suicide. And so the thing is the interviewer was asking me like, well, what do you do like when you don't have time for it? Like you're getting up, you're going to work, you're doing this, and for the medical professionals. And I was like, you make time. Because the thing is that it's not just going to magically appear.
Right.
I remember a time when I was like, I'm a therapist, I'm so busy. And then when I'm not doing therapy, I just want to relax. I don't have time to go see a therapist because that's my relax time. But you know what? I also realized that if I don't go talk to somebody about all the things that are going on with me, I'm agitated because I'm having to deal with everybody else's stuff and nobody's there to take care of my stuff because I don't even have the energy for it. So I had to make time. I had to find the money in my budget. I had to make it happen for myself because I'm with me all the time. I have to take care of me. It's just, it has to be a priority. Otherwise, people will call you and text you and email you at all hours of the day and night and think that they have a right to, because we're kind of in the space of, well, I don't want to lose my job. So we're responding and right. But the thing is that I don't know the laws, but there's got to be some laws that are created or put into legislation because there's got to be some boundary. There's got to be some separation. And I think most reasonable superiors, bosses, whoever will hear you out when you say like, hey, I need to set a boundary. Maybe there's one day where you work a little later. Figure out what it's going to look like so that it works for everybody. But
I just saw somebody like speaking on exactly that. Like right now, where people who are so fortunate to have a job and work are kind of like, I'm so thankful to have a job, that they're like heads nose to the ground, like going hard, working, overworking, because they're grateful to still be working. But it's like you said, you should still set, your boundaries and not feel like you're not doing your job because you set some sort of boundary.
I just feel like things can be negotiated. And I get it. There are some people who are in positions where you just don't have a lot of flexibility. And in those cases, like, you still have to find the time, even if it's on the weekends where you would normally just kind of veg out and watch episodes of whatever for forever and lay on the couch or whatever. Like, you have to find the time to take care of you. Yeah. And so I feel like things could be negotiated if you talk with whoever your boss is or your supervisor and just say, hey, these are the things that I need. We're in a time where I didn't anticipate that it was going to happen. Right. I didn't know how I was going to respond, but this is what is happening in my mind and my body, and I need to be well. And I feel like, I hope and pray people are good.
Right. Well, do you have any tips, I guess, for coping in this time? I mean, you've given some pretty good ones already, just through kind of like the conversation and stuff, but do you have any like just tips for dealing with mental health, people who might be struggling, just kind of trying to find their footing in this period where we don't know?
I would say consider therapy. If you have not been to therapy, if you don't have a therapist, if it's something that your family doesn't believe in or you don't think you should do, consider it anyway. Do a little research on the therapists in your area. Psychology Today is a great place to put in what your insurance is, what you're willing to pay, what you need, and they will bring you a list of people in your area that fit that criteria. And you can look at them, you can send them an email. Also know that you get to interview your therapist. Just because they're doing an assessment with you, like, it is an interview for you as well. And goodness of fit matters. And any good therapist will say, hey, this is a good fit, hey, this is not. Yes. And so taking the time to do that so that you can find someone to talk to. But also, I think what Afeni does with the meditation, if you can listen to some of her sessions, if you can get in contact with her to set something up, that is great. Because I remember, pardon?
I do individual sessions. Is one of
yes, individual sessions. I leaned up like I could.
Wait,
pardon?
Come again?
Sorry, guys. But yeah, like, getting some meditation sessions. If you can't do an individual session with her, doing the little free headspace sessions, little 10-minute sessions, are just as good. I'm sure there's tons on YouTube and Spotify. Get some time outside. The days have been so lovely. And the sun is a good source of vitamin D, which is our natural happy drug. Like, go outside, get some of it. Talk to somebody. Yes. Spend time talking to your family, talking to your significant others, talking to your friends. I have friends where every 2 weeks we just do a video chat. And listen, I am tired of video chats, okay? Like, I do it every single day, all week long, but I prioritize video chats with my friends because, it's just good to check in with people. And I'm not being a therapist in those moments, but I'm relating, and right. In a time where we're socially distancing and we're not able to connect in the same way, it's good to find new ways to connect. And then, explore some of those things that you thought you would do when you were a kid that you didn't end up doing. Just be creative, be lazy. Don't feel like you gotta have your nose to the grind all the time. Like, just take some time, get lost in a TV show or a movie. And don't put a lot of pressure on yourself about how you need to be doing, because we're all operating under stress right now.
Yeah, we are.
We are in survival mode. This is not a time to be like, oh, if you didn't come out of quarantine with some new project or don't do that. Don't do that. This is not a time where, like, it's like fertile soil to grow something.
Right.
Trauma.
Right. Right. And I've seen that on social media. If you don't come out of quarantine with a new skill and 7 new sources of income, you was slacking. Like, dang.
Mind your business. Mind your business.
What is I have to say? 'Cause that's your business.
Right, that is your MO.
Well, Erin, I want to, before we, come to a close soon, I do want to ask you, I want to shift back to mental health. Do you think with not even COVID, because we've gone through that, but mostly like the things that's been in the media now, as far as like back to these deaths of Black men and Black women, do you think that is taking a toll on people's mental health as well? Like, it's not our experience, but it is, because we are all Black. We understand
trauma porn.
That's trauma that we're all dealing with is on top of what's going on.
So there's something that's trauma adjacent called vicarious trauma. And that is where when you are witness to something, you hear about something traumatic, you feel something, and you're like, well, I didn't know this person. Like, he's not my cousin, she's not my sister. Like, but I'm feeling like something happened to me. That is, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And the whole concept is that when we experience trauma, whether it be direct trauma or vicarious trauma, our body keeps record of it. And it comes out in all different kinds of ways. So we might find ourselves a little more aggressive. We might find ourselves a little more snappy with people. We might find ourselves distancing and isolating. Pay attention to those things. Pay attention to the people that are around you. If you're not in quarantine by yourself, pay attention to those things to make sure that people aren't being affected in that way. And if they are, talk to them. And if you can get them to go talk to a therapist, obviously we're doing telehealth. And so you don't even have to go to an office. It can happen all through email. Like, all the prep can happen through email, and then we can do an assessment online, and we can do all the paperwork online. But yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a desensitization to it. So it's either or, right? Like, we're either severely impacted or we're desensitized because we're watching these videos of Black people being killed. We're hearing these stories all the time. Right. And so even I've had to kind of be a little more particular with the time I spend on social media, because I know as a therapist, like, I have my hand on the pulse of all the negativity of the world because I chose to do this as a career. And so in my entertainment, in my spare time, I have to be very aware and conscious of what I'm absorbing. So it took me a long time to pay attention to some of the more recent incidents that have happened, because I just know I can't take it in. But paying attention to yourself in that way, and not feeling guilty as a Black person if you don't know about the last Black person that was killed, because you're protecting yourself.
Right.
Yeah. It has an effect.
that's real. Like, everything you said, like, I've seen myself. I watched some of those videos and just wanted to cry. Like, I don't know this person, no, but it's just, you relate.
Trauma. Because we're constantly thinking it's such a random event that it could have been my brother, my sister, my cousin, my aunt, my uncle, whomever. And so we tie it back to us. And I think that might even be some of the epigenetics of trauma that we were talking about in the beginning, the post-traumatic slave syndrome. Like, I feel like that might be tied to it, because slaves had to watch other people's family members be killed and be like, well, it could be my family member next. Like, it's generational for sure. And there are ways that we can protect ourselves from seeing so much by limiting. Like, I have a timer on my Facebook, because that's usually where like a lot of the like gunk ends up for me. And so like, I only get 15 minutes a day on there. After that, like, I can't. Like, I set a timer and my phone just says, oh, enough for today.
I need to do that for Instagram.
Yeah.
It was like being quarantined. I literally said this the other day. The only like good thing that was just being stressed and anxious all the time and trying to figure out the new norm was that I didn't have to hear about the stories. Like, it stopped for a little bit, and here we are. We're back at it again. So we're just putting more trauma on top of stress, on top of anxiety, on top of depression. Like, it was like a little bit of
a blip of time.
For 1 second, it was like, okay. We're going to work on this, and here we are, back to reality. You know what I mean?
Well, and it was almost like, hey, this is something that's happening to everybody. Like, coronavirus does not discriminate between races and genders. Like, it could hit anybody at any point in time. And we thought, oh, well, there might have been a little ageism with it, but no. No, it's anybody. And so for like a hot second, we were all on a level playing field. Like, you don't have to like my skin, but that Rona can get you.
And got brought back to reality.
Right? But then
really quickly.
But then, so it's really important to protect your peace, to protect your mental health, protect your mental space by the things that we allow in our entertainment. I have some friends who are like, I am not watching any more slave period pieces. I have people who are like, I'm not watching anything else about the police killing Black people, and it doesn't even matter how good of a series it is. I'm like, oh, you need no. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to respect that because we're all under distress. We're all in stress right now.
Is there any other resources that you want to provide to the people that are listening, as far as like where you can find therapists or just help? Or
I think Psychology Today is a great space to find a therapist. Also check your Department of Health and Human Services. They should have a good list. Call your insurance providers if you have insurance, and they will give you a list of people that are covered. So that it hopefully won't cost you a lot. I'll tell you right now, and I don't even mind sharing this, I was paying $104 for therapy for one session a month, and recently found out that my insurance is covering it 100%.
Wow, that's
that's mine. So it's worth checking. It's worth checking.
So check it out.
I feel like, you know what?
Do your Google.
I feel like that's the reason why people don't go to therapy, because
it's expensive.
Our community, their health insurance does not cover that. So they don't want to do that out of pocket expense.
Yeah. So there's another piece to that. And that's something that I've also been struggling with and trying to figure out how to kind of cover. I do a lot of free work. I'm not even going to lie. Like, I do a lot of pro bono work because I just know that it's so hard for people to have access to mental health. And it should be something that's just a right, not a privilege.
Absolutely.
Because it's how we experience life. But yeah, like, that's something that is very important to me, is making it more accessible. And accessibility is a huge part of the stigma around it, because if you're struggling to pay your monthly bills, you're not going to be like, well, let me set aside $100 for a therapy session to do something that everyone else has told me I'm not even supposed to do anyway, and I can go to church for free. Yeah, they might fuss at me about my offering and my tithes, but they're not going to tell me not to come.
What is it? Maslow's hierarchy. Like, how can you focus on yourself, your inner self,
when you don't have food?
When you don't have food and shelter, right?
And that's one of the things they teach us first when we're coming into working with people, is like, as therapists, we're like, yes, let's talk about our emotions. Let's get in there. And people are like, but they about to turn my lights off. So
right.
So you have to readjust, and you have to talk about, well, what can we do to help? And we have to start looking for resources and ways to find money for people to be able to keep their lights on. And that usually builds trust. The therapist is like, if you're willing to work with me on this, then maybe I can talk to you about some of these other things that are going on in my world. But yeah, being a therapist does not mean I'm sitting here talking to you laying on the couch. A majority of people doing 10,000 other things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's also other resources for like therapists of color, like Black therapists. Yes. You can definitely find websites like that, like Therapy for Black Girls is one. I found my therapy on there. There's a lot of, you can find many websites.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's any around you. You just put your zip code in, figure out who you want to speak to. Like you said earlier, it is something where you do interview them and they interview you. Yes. So you don't have to feel obligated just to go to them if you don't, most of them do consultations, right?
Yeah, they'll do a short consultation, the first, like over the phone. And I think at that point in time, it's really good to ask very specific questions. If you are like, I need to talk about things related to race, you can ask, are you comfortable having these kinds of conversations? Are you open-minded enough to do that? I need to talk about, some kind, like if it's a couples issue, we need to talk about our finances. We need to talk about our sex life. You can ask very specifically, can you handle this? Is this something that we can talk about? Is this something that's part of your expertise? Because if it's not, can you please direct me to someone who will do that? I think it's very important to remember. It's just like a job. Like, you interview your job while they're interviewing you. It is a mutual experience.
Yes.
Great advice.
That's great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Erin. Like, I feel like I learned a lot. Like, it was insightful, you know?
Absolutely.
You brought me back. You know, now I know I can go. Now I know where to go look. If I need a start, well, I need a therapist. I know I need a therapist. I know.
And if I can say one more thing, it's not always that everything is going wrong that you need to talk to somebody. Sometimes it's just good to have a space to talk and just air stuff out where you don't get all of the criticisms, and then you don't have to go and sit and have dinner with that person later. Like, sometimes it's just good to have a space. But sometimes it's good to just have a space that's very specific, and it's your emotional dumpster, and you just go and put it down and leave it, and then you come back in a month or a couple of weeks and say, hey, this is the new trash I have, or whatever.
Right.
Emotion.
Okay. Well, we're at the end of it.
Yes.
We're at the end of this episode. So thank you so much, Erin. You are so appreciated. You're so amazing. You're so wonderful. We really, really do appreciate you coming and talking to us. Fake deep quote of the week. I have one.
What is it?
You live most of your life inside of your head.
Okay.
Make sure it's a nice place to be.
Beautiful.
You did that.
That was really good.
You know, I don't always come, but when I don't always have it. But when I have it. All right, y'all can Erin, where can they find you at?
Yeah.
Like, did you want to get like your social media or anything like that?
If they want to book a session, how do they do that?
Hello.
So my personal Instagram is quite lavishly. But I also have a podcast called Two Elephants in the Room. It's me and another Delta. We're both therapists, so Two Elephants in the Room. And yeah, that's where you can find me. If you want to book a session with me, you can find me at buildingendurance.com.
Okay.
You heard her. You can follow us at Fake Deep the Podcast on Instagram, Fake Deep the Podcast 1 on Twitter.
Fake Deep the Podcast on YouTube. That's all right.
Now Fake Deep the Podcast on YouTube. Yeah. So make sure to keep watching. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Let's see.